came within 565 feet of each other. Here's the air traffic control recording.
Middle land 4 right, JetBlue 206.
JetBlue 206, correct. 2065, runway heading, maintain 3000.
Runway heading up to, sorry, say again the altitude?
3000.
3000, JetBlue 206.
Yeah, I like how calm they are. This scare in Boston was just a day after a close call between two commercial planes in Burbank, California. And a few weeks ago, you'll remember in Honolulu, a United Airlines 777 jet crossed a runway as a smaller cargo plane was landing. And then days before that, an American Airlines flight at JFK crossed in front of a Delta plane trying to take off. And then there was the near miss in Austin where a FedEx plane almost landed on top of a Southwest flight. I want to bring in our aviation expert, David Susi, who always tries to make me feel better about these things. But David, I'm starting to think these are not all anomalies. It's starting to feel like there's one of these a week that we report on.
It seems like they're a lot more often, and that is only because they are more often right now. If you look at the traffic that's going on in Boston right now, that Boston was at 12,000 flights in January 2021, and now it's come over to up to 29,000 in January 2023. So it's nearly 3 times as much traffic, and they're spacing the airplanes a lot closer together. They're trying to get them out faster. Now, this particular one, Allison, you need to feel a little more comfortable about this one because this was a mistake that was made by the pilot, and it was caught by air traffic control, which is their job. So they were able to catch it.
Okay, I guess that makes me feel better, though the mistake by the pilot doesn't make me feel that great. But why is there so much more traffic? Why are they having 3 times as many planes as they used to?
Well, it's just the demand. There's more demand. There's more flights. There's more people traveling. I think it's after COVID, post-COVID, everybody's back in the idea that they can just go fly now. So every flight I've been on has been completely packed in just the last few months for sure. And they're just getting more and more packed. So the only way that the airspace system can handle more flights and full flights is by getting them off the runway faster. So they just keep getting them off the runway faster. So they need to slow these things down and get back to what is a sensible rate when we talk about departures. And it may delay it. It may be where you can't get the flight that you want to have at this point, but they have to do something about trying to slow this system down.
But David, one last question before I bring in the panel. Are we back at the same amount of flights we were pre-COVID, or is it even more than that?
It's actually exceeding what we were pre-COVID. I know that was an issue for the airlines for a long time, but Boston specifically, if we look at pre-COVID, they were up around 24,000, but now we're up around 29,000 just for Boston specifically. But so we have exceeded what we did before as far as the number of seats and the number of passengers moving.
Okay, stick around with us if you would, David, because we'll have more questions joining the conversation.
Sure.
We have Business Whiz and Axios reporter Erica Pandy, former Senate candidate Joe Pinion, and 2 of our favorite talkers, Elsie Granderson and John Avlon. Yes, it's so true. Erica, welcome. So this one is a little bit different. As David was just saying, this was a private plane and it was pilot error. I don't know why I'm supposed to feel better about that, but don't private planes have to follow the same rules, or I guess not?
I mean, I would guess so, right? Like, I think the big thing here is that as flyers, as consumers, you and I just don't know what's going on. All we see is a story like this every week, and we're seeing more and more of them, right, as people are trying to break back into travel after COVID. I didn't even know that there's more flights now than before COVID. I mean, all I know is that the FAA is definitely, understaffed, underfunded. That's been reported. The budget in 2022 was $18.5 billion for the FAA, which is actually less than it was in 2004, adjusted for inflation. So we have more flights, we probably need better technology. We're in the 2020s, but why is the budget less than it was in 2004?
That's a great question. John, there was a big infrastructure bill that passed. Isn't it supposed to be helping with some of this stuff?
$25 billion worth of help on the way, allegedly. And look, I think that obviously can address a couple of fundamental issues. One, a lot of the technology is old. That's a problem. 2, we've got a capacity issue. As David was saying earlier, this is partly about the demand, but that all means that we're going to have to increase the supply of runways, of airports regionally and other places. But that money's been allocated, and part of the problem is that, but none of that's going to take away human error. Burnt out pilots, folks being distracted. And that seems to be the cause of some of these near misses.
Yeah, great point, Joe. I mean, we do know that there have been strikes at airline, picketing of pilots and flight attendants, and they are feeling overworked.
Well, look, I think to your point, obviously we know that more money would help, but you also have to build a bridge to the future that you seek. And so whether you're talking about people who want to reimagine policing or whether you're talking about individuals that want to deal with the diminished infrastructure that we have for airplanes or the overworked pilots, what is the plan to make sure that people don't end up in a fiery casket on the runway? So I think that's just the hard truth.
I appreciate that because he just said, this is my fear.
now.
Well, I just think, again, in this country, no one ever seems to care and take things seriously until people die. And so this airline industry that has been subsidized by the American taxpayer, their greatest innovation is making sure that you can pay more money to carry your own bag. At some point, we have to ask the hard question, when are you going to prioritize the safety and security of the people that are quite literally entrusting their family?
Sounding like a Democrat, Joe. I don't know.
I think it's just common sense. I think at the end of the day,
I agree.
Look, I think Republicans and Democrats want to make sure that they don't blow up on their way to grandma's house.
I agree. That's, you know what? We can all get together on that.
I think
Common
also-
ground.
Always grandma's house.
What about grandpa's house?
What about grandpa's
No
house?
one talks about grandpa.
Never.
But the house also belongs to grandma, whether grandpa still lives there or not. That's just the truth.
Yeah, he makes an excellent point about that. I think the other point that Joe makes is that, yes, we do a good job of being reactive instead of proactive with these things.
Yes, but that's our culture about almost everything, our medical system. I mean, look at our bridges and roads. Like, we know from the American Society of Civil Engineers that much of our infrastructure is in much disarray and needs attention, and we've known that not for
But we're doing
5
that
years.
now, right? I mean, isn't this starting to change now?
It's
with
starting to
infrastructure?
change, but the warning signs have been happening for decades. Like literally decades, they've been saying these bridges need to be repaired. This needs to be worked on. The FAA. I mean, I just read a story that the IRS is still using technology from like the 1950s, and that they're understaffed.
That's strategic on the part of some people. But no, I think, look, the flow through and all of what we're saying here is that too often in America, we wait for a crisis to solve a problem, even when the evidence is staring us in our face. And we cannot and should not do that when it comes to airline safety. It's been over a decade since a major disaster, thank God. We shouldn't have to wait till one.
So, David, understaffed and underfunded, that doesn't sound good. And so is that taking its toll, or is it the crumbling system that needs updating?
No, I think it's a little bit of both, but we have these plateaus of technology that we've had within the FAA. And we talk about this new big budget that's come through for the FAA, but that doesn't mean that that money's actually appropriated. And this is an important point to make. Just because they said, hey, you're going to get $25 billion this year for this and this, it doesn't mean that that money is actually given to the FAA. I used to go to Congress and plead for money every year when I was with the FAA about 15 years ago. And when we would do that, they'd say, yeah, oh, this is great. I don't want to be the congressman that turns us down because I don't want to be the one standing there saying we had a crash because of me. So they'll say, yeah, let's get this money out there. And then they do, and they sign those bills. But when it comes time to actually appropriate that money and put it into the right pockets, that's where it all falls apart. And that's what needs to have some focus. And this goes back to having an FAA administrator that's in the seat more than just 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. They need to be there for the entire infrastructure development. They need to get an administrator that they can keep in there and isn't just some kind of a political appointment. They need someone that really has the backing behind them to make sure that these programs go through all the way through and don't just get dropped.
Yeah, you make an excellent point.